Good morning, good evening to everyone. Welcome to the International Strategic Thinking Center, CEPEI, and Colombian Confederation of NGO, CCONG, side event on VNRs improvement. This conversation has simultaneous translation available. Please use the button below labeled language to adjust the language in which you prefer to participate. Today, we will learn on the voices and experiences from governments, the United Nations, and civil society organizations, and we'll explore how second and subsequent VNRs building, which is the new normal, could beneficiate from previous voluntary national review exercises. Because we strongly believe in the powerful tool intended in learning by doing, we ask to our panelists how to take advantage on lessons learned building previous VNRs in subsequent presentations. These experiences from Latin America and the Caribbean would be very rewarded. We invite you to use the Q&A button on the bottom bar of your screens to write your concerns during the presentations so that we can resolve them at the end of the presentations in the space provided to do so. With us, Natalia Patiño González, Senior Researcher in Governance and Financing for Sustainable Development at International Strategic Thinking Center, CEPEI. Welcome, Mrs. Patiño. For the next 7 minutes, the floor is yours.
Well, hello to all, and thanks for being here during this morning. As Lynn already mentioned, I'm part of Cepei. Cepei is a data-driven tank from the Global South. We analyze, propose, and drive action for sustainable development through fostering multi-stakeholder dialogue, generating evidence for decision-making, and expanding the production and use of open data across the sectors and regions, especially in Latin America and the Caribbean. And to start, and about the question that gathers us today, how to take advantage of lessons learned building previous VNRs and subsequent presentations, the first thing we need to have in mind is each VNR and secondary generation VNRs or subsequents are not a way to present a new beginning each time. They are more like an evidence that presents how states keep walking and making advances while realizing opportunities in order to achieve 2030 agenda and SDGs. Although the VNRs are configured as mechanisms for monitoring and review progress in meeting the SDGs, their joint presentation and analysis before the high-level political forum and regionally at the regional forums on sustainable development, it is characterized and it is really evident that they presented themselves as the narrative for joint actions in light of the goals that are perceived and as an integrated manner and that encompass the three spheres to achieve sustainable development: the economic, the environmental, and the social. The second generation reviews aims to provide a more comprehensive assessments of a country's achievements. It is a tool to analyze the efforts to address findings from the first voluntary national reviews and the impact of this report. The secondary generation reviews are not intended to be an standalone report, but to directly follow up analysis from the first one. It is important to remember that the second generation reviews consider the factors that have driven change within the states, like all those factors that have been occurring and happening since the moment the first review was presented to the present moment, by portraying and evidencing how these advances or not has been attributing to create improvements, and they are the results of policy and they're the result of policy responses or interventions. And even the cases in which these responses have been a little bit negative. In order to achieve effective progress and in order to create and to bring a greater, a major number of participants and to come to have a really a second level, I'm sorry to all. This loop of words created some misunderstanding in my head sometimes. In order to have and to count with a major quality second level VNR and to have a second level VNR which a much stronger background, one of the opportunities that the states need to have in mind is they can present the strategy they are going to implement within the forums, the regional forums. In these cases, they have a big opportunity to count with more allies to present to their peers the strategy they are going to implement to construct, to build the document itself. And they can create and promote a culture of continuous improvement. So the creation and the construction of these reviews can be enhanced and can be strengthened by a more open communication and discussion with different actors that are interested in this. To get a better understanding also, and also a better management for creating VNRs, secondary level VNRs, access to data would be a fact that that is really interesting, that is really necessary, because actualized data and can drive the construction to a higher level. In this case, also can help to construct and to build messages with enough time that can be presented not only within or without the states in different spaces such as HLPF, mainly because this data and these messages can help to access, can help to all the actors to present and to participate in dialogues more open, and to present in a better way all the actions that have been taken within the states to achieve not only the SDGs, but also the 2030 agenda. And at the same time, this can also bring other actors to make joint actions. Also among the recommendations that should not be forgotten are the analysis and recommendations already made and already provided by third parties with respect to previous reports. All of this having in mind that those recommendations are creating data like on real time, and can be traceable, more easily traceable in the time. And also could facilitate process for systematizing lessons learned and the identification and developing of action plans in order to fulfill all the commitments assumes. Finally, it is important to remember that although VNRs are mechanisms through which the states present progress in relation with the fulfillments of their commitments, this presentation of success, challenges, and limitations are not mechanisms to be accountable in face of other states, but to be accountable for civil society, private sector, academia, and citizens. To conclude, I would like to say that we must not lose sight of the fact that all the actors within the international society, we all want the same thing. We all share the same objective. That for 2030 agenda, it is met, that for 2030, the agenda it is met, and the SDGs are completely fulfilled, or as much as we can, to make this a better world, not just for us, but also for future generations. So as I don't have much time and this conversation is needs to keep going, I'm gonna go back to Lina. And thank you all for being here this morning.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Patiño. Mr. Romain Sivi is the Chief of Staff at the Office of the Executive Secretary in the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. Welcome, Mr. Valent. The floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Good day to all. Can you hear me well? Okay, well, thank you very much. Thanks for this event and thanks for the invitation. I'm just gonna share with you a couple of points As you know, so I represent ECLAC, the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. And as Natalia mentioned earlier, we organized every year the Regional Forum on Sustainable Development, which is the regional platform to prepare for the HLPF that takes place this week. So I just wanted to share with you a couple of findings that we've gathered on the topic that takes us today. The first point I want to say is that obviously we have a very active region, Latin America and the Caribbean, in terms of presenting their VNRs. As you know, there's already 28 of 33 countries, but before last year that presented their VNRs. And of these 28 countries, 14 have done so for more than once. So we know that there's already a wealth of experience and that there's been basically overall 46 VNRs already presented from the Latin American and Caribbean region. So that's a lot of information, a lot of findings that can be systematized, gathered, and shared. And that's what ECLAC and the UN system have been doing through tools like the SDG Gateway, which is an interagency tool that ECLAC hosts on its website, but that is fed by the UN entities as a whole and the countries themselves, where you can find all the information regarding their VNRs. And basically what we've been doing in the regional forums is precisely to create a community of practice of VNRs professionals at technical level, from governments, of course, but also from other stakeholders, to exchange and reflect on this process. And the first thing we've identified, of course, is that VNR is much more than the presentation at HLPF. VNR is a process, and thus by elaborating more than one VNR, there's much to gain. You might remember that in 2016, 2017, the VNRs were focusing a lot on institutional mechanisms to follow up on the 2030 agenda, on how they were, where they were embedded, in which ministries, did they have cross-ministerial characteristics, were they engaging other stakeholders, and so on. And with these countries that have prepared more than one VNR, we've seen that obviously the discussion has shifted from process much more to policy action, to different levels of involvement and of intervention of governments, to the systematization of different actors in the VNR process, not only government, as I was saying, but national statistic systems, civil society, private sector, and so on, which have been much more systematically engaged. So obviously, that's extremely fruitful. Another aspect that was mentioned by Natalia is the data and statistics aspect. Of course, at the beginning, we knew that there was a significant shortage of data and capacities for monitoring the SDGs. And as second generation VNRs were developed and established, well, these capacity and data gap was significantly reduced. And also countries were able to do some cross-fertilization of how to address these gaps, but also to engage other actors. We've seen that, well, national statistics systems, and for instance, from ECLAC, we hold the Statistics Conference of the Americas, where we gather annually the data and statistics community, which has also broadened and involves additional actors, and especially, well, non-traditional data actors, which have been able to add to this process and to add to the national statistics systems, who of course lead the SDG process. Another couple of aspects I wanted to mention, obviously, we mentioned that the first generation VNRs were much focused on raising awareness of actors. Now, if we look at third or fourth generation VNRs, we see that there's an increasing focus on the localization of SDGs and the territorialization of SDGs. Some countries who have already carried out 2 or 3 or more VNRs, for instance, and especially big countries such as Mexico or Argentina, are increasingly focusing on engaging local actors and territorial actors, and see how they can emphasize the territorialization of SDGs. Interestingly enough, in this year's HLPF, there is a strong focus on VLRs. There's been a few events last week. There's going to be a few events this week, where either cities or local actors or provinces in different countries of the region showcase how they are addressing the localization of SDGs. And at our upcoming Regional Council of Planning, who holds its presiding officers meeting next month, that's one of the aspects that we are going to address. Please let me know when I'm getting short of time, but otherwise I'm going to give a few other messages from ECLAC's experience. Something very interesting that we've learned from the community of practices. This is a monthly meeting that ECLAC holds with the governments, with other stakeholders, with DESA. We've held more than 50 meetings since 2019, and basically to focus on the fact that the VNR is a process, we want to engage on a continuous dialogue with VNR practitioners. And we've also learned that it's extremely useful to have cross-fertilization between those countries that have already carried out 2 to 3 or even 4, like Uruguay this year, VNRs, with first comers to see, well, not only the basics, so to speak, of VNR and of 2030 agenda monitoring, but all, such as institutional mechanisms, such as data statistics, stakeholder engagement, and so on, but also to focus on other aspects regarding the process, regarding policy action, regarding the means of implementation. Obviously, we all know, and we've heard it last week, the policy recommendations regarding the agenda have shifted a lot between 2016 to 2018, and now the post-COVID. Basically, last year, the year before, was focused a lot on emergency response, on addressing these aspects, and therefore SDGs that have been most affected by COVID, such as poverty, such as food security, such as education, and we're going to hear this week. To, let's say, emergency response policies, such as obviously the need for financing for development. The UN has been a very, very strong actor, and how to address these financing emergencies, for instance, in Caribbean countries, the high indebtedness, the lack of fiscal space, but that has affected Latin America and the Caribbean as a whole, and middle-income countries as a whole. So the policy discussion related to the VNR process also changes, and we think it's very useful to have these dialogues among countries. And for instance, this year we have 3 newcomers from the Caribbean who we've placed in contact with other countries of the Caribbean that had already carried out their VNRs for various times, such as Jamaica or Bahamas. But that's also discussions that we've had in some sub-regional settings in Central America. As you remember, 2019, 2020, 2021, they were affected not only by COVID, but also by extreme natural events. In South America, there's different challenges. So we think this cross-fertilization is extremely, extremely useful, and we hope to see the fruits this year. So I'm going to leave it here for now. And one last point I wanted to mention is that actually many of the actors that are here today, such as Cepei, such as ECLAC, such as DESA, every year in the regional forums, in the HLPF, we try to systematize what we've been discussing today and to disseminate it to all. We have regional and global workshops to strengthen capacities of member states to prepare their VNRs, and that's where we try to systematize all these lessons that we're discussing today. So thanks again for the invitation, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Sibi. As you will listen now, Jamaica is a second reporting country this year. Mrs. Latoya Clark is the Program Director at Sustainable Development Goals Secretariat in the Planning Institute of Jamaica. Welcome, Mrs. Clark. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Lena. Jamaica welcomes this opportunity to share in this discussion on VNR building, and we're grateful for the opportunity to share our experience on how we have applied the lessons from our first VNR that was conducted in 2018 to the second VNR that we will be presenting this year. Thank you for the opportunity to share. I will now be sharing my presentation. Are you able to view my screen?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
Thank you. As I mentioned, Jamaica presented our first VNR in 2018, and this was done through a participatory approach that engaged stakeholders across society. And the review process identified the need to interrogate some salient issues in implementation to strengthen the process moving forward. And as such, we conducted an audit of Jamaica's readiness to implement the SDGs, which confirmed the level of alignment between the National Development Plan and the SDGs, the number of applicable indicators, the monitoring systems being in place, sources of funding for the SDGs, and the institutional arrangements that were established for implementation. The audit also identified that there was a need to strengthen the M&D framework for Vision 2030 Jamaica and the SDGs. Vision 2030 Jamaica is the mechanism through which the SDGs are being implemented. It also identified the need to strengthen participation in national oversight bodies and the need for a long-term funding strategy for the SDGs. We also prepared a roadmap for communication and advocacy, and this roadmap identified strategies to communicate key messages that would build awareness and strengthen advocacy to bolster action through the whole of society approach that we had adopted for the SDGs. In addition, a Leaving No One Behind report was prepared to identify the strategies for improving targeting and addressing the vulnerabilities faced by groups at risk. And this report informed the preparation of the VNR. And so the VNR 2018 would have also assessed progress on the goals following the first 3 years of implementation, which was informed by the reporting on the medium-term socioeconomic policy framework of Vision 2030 Jamaica that had concluded within that year. And it was also informed by the priorities of the new MTF for the following period. This VNR would have laid the foundation for implementation going forward, addressing the gaps and challenges identified and inform the strengthening of the means of implementation, specifically in the areas of data, monitoring, capacity building, and financing. And so for the VNR 2018, we also prepared a statistical annex and conducted a review of the statistical capacity to monitor the SDG indicator framework. This second VNR sought to evaluate the progress that was made since 2018 and the issues and challenges that were identified in implementation. It also sought to identify the gaps and the lessons learned that would similarly support implementation going forward. And this is reflective of the iterative planning process through which the SDGs are being implemented in Jamaica. And we have learned a number of lessons which we have applied in the building of our second VNR. First, a strong M&D framework and system is fundamental to preparing a solid VNR. The value of timely, current, quality disaggregated data cannot be overstated. We have recognized that focus should be given to examining the strengths and gaps within the country and the specific approaches to strengthening the means of implementation. This will inform the identification of replicable lessons learned, as well as good practices to inform strategy and policy development to accelerate the achievement of the SDGs. Using the established National Development Planning Framework for implementation creates a distinct advantage in reporting through data availability from monitoring the 3-year implementation process. This demonstrates the achievements and gaps challenges, both against the targets and indicators, as well as the process of implementation and coordination. We have also recognized that stakeholder engagement must move beyond consultation to participation, enabling stakeholders to take ownership of the development process and outcomes. And this will bolster the VNR process, optimizing and maximizing participation. And so for this year, this 2022 VNR has featured youth-driven consultations. And for the first time, we had a Ministry of Government that wrote an entire chapter of the VNR, that is goal 3, and this signals a positive move towards ownership of the VNR process. We have also recognized that consistent and impactful coordination that builds capacity throughout the process provides a framework that supports effective planning at the national and subnational levels towards implementation of the SDGs, data gathering, stakeholder participation, and mobilizing the financial and technical support that is required for the process. And in coordination, it is important to close the feedback loops to avoid bottlenecks, particularly in the context of a limited time and resource setting, and to build stakeholder confidence in the process. We have also learned that it is important to demonstrate continuity in the implementation of the SDGs in second and subsequent VNRs. And this has been reflected in the 2022 VNR, the process of evaluation, and has benefited from the iterative planning and reporting processes, which is the context, which in this context is the results-based management process and system that supports the implementation of national development planning and the SDGs. From the 2022 VNR, we have identified opportunities that can inform the implementation and reporting processes going forward. This VNR has demonstrated that there are opportunities to strengthen implementation and coordination for the SDGs. And among these opportunities are a strengthened national statistics system and preparation of a data dashboard for the SDGs that will strengthen future VNRs through the availability of data to monitor the SDGs, track progress, and show change over time, demonstrating again the need for showing continuity in second and subsequent VNRs. We also have identified the opportunity to deepen stakeholder engagement, particularly at the local level where we have recognized a gap in engagement. The VNR process enables dialogue, however, at this level, and post-VNR, there's opportunity to strengthen the engagement process, promoting advocacy and action at the local level. We were not able to conduct a full VLR this year. However, building on the efforts towards localization since the VNR 2018, we prepared a thematic report on SDGs localization, and we anticipate that this report will strengthen and inform our efforts to further localize the SDGs, and perhaps for the next VNR, we can look forward to having an accompanying VLR. The VNR also identified lessons learned for each goal or each sector, and this is building on the approach that we took in 2018. And this provided the opportunity to inform strengthening of the process of implementation, coordination, and monitoring by identifying uniquely those factors within each sector that require interventions and efforts to spur progress. We have also recognized that partnerships forged during the process and in support of the process may also be strengthened to support the SDGs implementation going forward, and also the reporting process. And what was different about the 2022 VNR is that, for example, we were able to deepen engagement and partnerships with the UN system. So the draft VNR benefited from the review and consultation with various UN agencies who had the opportunity to also provide input in the development of the chapters and in reporting on the goals. We also engaged in partnership with other agencies that participated in the review process through a panel that included the coordinating entity, the UNRCO, as well as academia. And we found that this was a good approach that strengthened our efforts in preparing this second VNR report. We have also recognized that there is opportunity for meaningful friendship and pairing with other countries presenting their VNRs. And we propose forming these friendships in the early stages of development and undertaking the journey together in order to maximize support. And these friendships may also support learning in the implementation process and can be facilitated through the community of practice, which for us has been a great platform for peer learning and dialogue. So thank you. That is my presentation.
Thank you, Mrs. Clark. Let me introduce Mrs. Clarissa Martinez and Mr. Antonio Diaz from the Technical Secretariat of the Cabinet for Social Affairs in the Office of the President of Panama. They will be a 2023 VNR volunteer country. Mrs. Martinez and Mr. Diaz, the floor is yours for the next 7 minutes.
Muchas gracias. Buen día, saludos a todos los panelistas y público que sigue este evento que atinadamente ha organizado el Centro de Pensamiento Estratégico Internacional. A Cepei, gracias por la invitación a este evento. Bien, en 8 minutos intentaré resumir la experiencia panameña en la elaboración de 2 informes nacionales voluntarios presentados en los años 2017 y 20, respectivamente ante el ECOSOC en el Foro Político de Alto Nivel de Naciones Unidas. Además de compartir cómo Panamá se prepara para la implementación del tercer informe. Así que trataré de ser breve. El punto de partida para la adopción de la Agenda 2030 en Panamá se ve reflejado con la elaboración y publicación del Decreto Ejecutivo 393 de septiembre de 2015, que adopta los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible. Dicha normativa asume que los ODS son una pauta o deben ser asumidos como una pauta para los esfuerzos de desarrollo humano inclusivo y sostenible del Gobierno de la República de Panamá. Decisión política que pasa de nos hace pasar de los ODM, de los Objetivos de Desarrollo del Milenio, a los ODS, y que sienta las bases para iniciar la asimilación de estas aspiraciones y brinda sostenibilidad de largo aliento al proceso. No obstante, es importante dejar sentado el contexto en que se han realizado los exámenes voluntarios y en el que nos encontramos preparándonos para el 2023. Son contextos totalmente distintos a nivel nacional e internacional, cuya huella quedó evidenciada en cada uno de los reportes. A julio de 2017, cuando se presentó el primer informe nacional voluntario, Panamá avanzaba con el proceso de apropiación de la Agenda 2030 y sus objetivos de desarrollo sostenible, por medio de la Comisión Interinstitucional y de la sociedad civil, creada por la normativa antes indicada, a fin de establecer la gobernanza para el apoyo y seguimiento de los ODS e integrada por 2 instancias estatales y una instancia público-privada que representa el mayor ejercicio de deliberación y participación ciudadana. Es precisamente a través de la Concertación Nacional para el Desarrollo que se realiza una amplia convocatoria a las fuerzas políticas y sociales del país para facilitar la alineación de los ODS, el Plan Estratégico de Gobierno 2015-2019 y las prioridades actualizadas de la concertación. Como resultado, se destaca el desarrollo del Plan Estratégico Nacional con Visión de Estado, Panamá 2030. En el marco de la Comisión de los ODS, se impulsó la organización y funcionamiento de espacios de cooperación intersectorial para la transversalización, la coordinación, seguimiento, monitoreo y discusión de acciones vinculadas al cumplimiento de las metas de los ODS. El objetivo de dichos espacios era transversalizar las políticas públicas y definir sectores de cooperación para generar acciones intersectoriales e integrales dirigidas al cierre de brechas, superación de obstáculos y eliminación de privaciones. Sin embargo, el proceso de alineamiento en este contexto presentó un número plural de limitantes. Por una parte, desde finales de 2015 e inicios de 2016, Panamá realizó esfuerzos importantes para definir la capacidad estadística del país en seguimiento a los avances de los ODS. Este impulso dado por el Instituto Nacional de Estadística y Censo contó con apoyo financiero del Sistema de Naciones Unidas, lo que permitió que Panamá identificara 75 indicadores en el nivel 1 con los datos disponibles. El resto de los indicadores se encontraban en el nivel 2, que son datos que son indicadores que no cuentan con datos. Y también en el nivel 3, que son indicadores que no tienen ni metodología ni datos. Otra gran limitante que marcó la experiencia panameña en el primer informe nacional voluntario es el hecho que las acciones de socialización de los ODS estaban exclusivamente dirigidas a personal de las instituciones públicas, con el fin de promover la apropiación de la Agenda 2030 dentro del sector gubernamental. El nexo con el sector no estatal de cara al cumplimiento de la Agenda 2030 se efectuó solo por medio de la concertación. En este marco, las actividades frente a los ODS gravitaron en torno a la vinculación de las acciones e iniciativas del Plan Estratégico Nacional con Visión de Estado PEN 2030 y la identificación de metas ODS priorizadas en este plan. Para el segundo reporte del año 2020, el proceso de elaboración del Informe Nacional Voluntario estuvo coordinado por la Secretaría Técnica del Gabinete Social, donde labora quien les habla, como unidad operativa el Comité Técnico de la Comisión Interinstitucional y de la Sociedad Civil para apoyo y seguimiento de los ODS, ya que, como he expresado, es la instancia encargada de la evaluación y el seguimiento de la implementación de la Agenda 2030 y los ODS. La experiencia fue marcada por la pandemia de COVID-19, como quedó establecido en el informe, dado el contexto de las medidas adoptadas por el Gobierno Nacional para enfrentar esta emergencia. La Secretaría Técnica del Gabinete Social diseñó 6 encuestas virtuales dirigidas al sector no gubernamental con el objetivo de conocer y captar la lectura que tendría el grupo de actores frente al compromiso de país que representa la Agenda 2030. Los instrumentos se aplicaron a actores de la sociedad civil, gremios, empresas privadas, organizaciones sin fines de lucro, sector académico y organismos internacionales que desde sus ámbitos y posiciones ofrecieron sus aportes en materia de política pública y de cómo contribuyen con su quehacer organizativo a la implementación de la Agenda 2030. En la consulta a los diferentes actores se invitó a participar a 281 organizaciones. Se obtuvieron 175 respuestas, de las que 75 responden a instituciones públicas, 79 organizaciones de la sociedad civil, 9 al sector privado y 12 a la academia. Perfeccionar estas alianzas entre sectores como mecanismos para el cumplimiento de la Agenda 2030 y sus objetivos con acciones fundamentales aún representa retos para Panamá, toda vez que la elaboración del Informe Nacional Voluntario demanda que, además de contar con la participación de todos los actores institucionales y gubernamentales, la sociedad civil, el sector privado, los gremios, la academia, se propicie una discusión horizontal, o sea, una discusión multisectorial y vertical con los gobiernos subnacionales y locales. El segundo reporte fue clave para la sistematización del documento y para el anexo estadístico. El acompañamiento técnico de la Cepei a través de la comunidad de práctica para países de América Latina y del Caribe, que presentan sus informes, y del Sistema de Naciones Unidas Task Force en Panamá, que ha sido muy valioso para llevar adelante todo este proceso. Por lo tanto, en esta tarea de preparación es necesario contar con herramientas de monitoreo mediante la cual se pueda dar seguimiento a todos los procesos de implementación de los ODS e igualmente fortalecer los mecanismos de articulación multisectorial para el desarrollo de acciones integrales de políticas públicas donde participen los diversos actores. En esta línea, bajo la coordinación de la Secretaría Técnica del Gabinete Social, aprovechando las plataformas virtuales, se organizaron 2 espacios de trabajo. Uno que es la Mesa Técnica de Estadística e Indicadores y la Mesa de Políticas Públicas. La primera, con la tarea de identificar los datos que el país tenía disponible para reportar y actualizarla al año 2018. Por su parte, la Mesa de Políticas Públicas, en grupos correspondientes a las 5 esferas de desarrollo sostenible, o las 5 pilares, se responsabilizó de la valoración cualitativa e identificación de acciones dirigidas al logro de los ODS. De cara al tercer reporte, en un contexto post-pandemia y de recuperación económica y social, luego de 2 años en donde la realización de mediciones y actualización de datos fue impactada negativamente por las medidas de confinamiento, Panamá ha iniciado su preparación adoptando una hoja de ruta conjunta entre la Secretaría Técnica del Gabinete Social y el Instituto Nacional de Estadística y Censo para la elaboración del Informe Nacional Voluntario 2023. Así, el INEC ha actualizado los instrumentos de recolección de datos y se abocó a la actualización de los 70 indicadores reportados en el año 2020. En colectivo con la reactivación de la Mesa de Estadística y Censo y de manera bilateral con las instituciones del gobierno que presentaron desafíos para reportar sus indicadores. A la par, a lo interno de la Secretaría Técnica del Gabinete Social se ha iniciado la revisión de la información por pilares y se ha acordado un calendario de reuniones con los mecanismos existentes para la construcción del informe. Llámese Mesa de Política Pública, Comité Técnico del Índice de Pobreza Multidimensional, Comisión Interinstitucional y de la Sociedad Civil, por los ODS, entre otros. E igualmente se ha establecido un canal de comunicación con la Oficina de la Coordinación Regional de Naciones Unidas en Panamá para la asistencia y acompañamiento en este proceso. La clave de este tercer reporte para Panamá es evidenciar resultados preliminares del esfuerzo que el país realiza desde distintos sectores y niveles de la vida nacional. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz. Mr. Roberto Valent, the Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean from the UN Development Coordination Office, was unable to join this meeting because he has to support a government from the region. We will send him the recording of the meeting, which will also be available for future review of other hearings and for us too. Now we have time for some questions and answers. We invite you to write your questions in the chat box of this meeting. But to start this conversation, I want to make one question, because I was thinking while you were sharing your experiences that Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as it happens at the Global South, has this daily emergency of needs. Sometimes it seems like a loop from priorities to prior priorities to prior priorities and so on, or this is a sophisticated mechanism to look into development in a different appreciation of it from the first VNR to the other. How is the Jamaica's or Panama's experience with priorities from the first VNR to another? I don't know if maybe Mrs. Clark or maybe Mr. Diaz want to share their experience about this. Who wants to go first?
May I?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Mrs. Clark.
Thank you for your question, Nino. The issue of priorities is certainly an important challenge that we face, particularly in the context of limited financial and human resources, as well as coping with the emerging challenges and the new issues that constrain our development process. But Jamaica has benefited from the iterative development planning process in which we have been able to do frequent evaluations, and those evaluations have informed how we prioritize the issues that are important to development. And in addition to that, the monitoring framework that attends that iterative process has also informed how we define the priorities going forward.
Thank you, Mrs. Clark. Mrs. Clark, maybe Mr. Antonio Diaz want to share some insights about this topic?
Bueno, sí. Yo poco diría que tiene que ver mucho con enfrentar desafíos en términos de poder, digamos, hacer estos balances entre antes de la pandemia, posterior a la pandemia, cuánto al final se han impactado las brechas de desigualdades y las brechas que ya previamente teníamos para poder alcanzar los ODS, cómo al final esto representa retos importantes y nos coloca en otra posición distinta, ¿no? Evidentemente también los retos que hay en materia estadística es cómo integrar a toda la medición lo que se hace desde el sector privado, ¿no? Y desde la sociedad civil. Si bien tal vez lo que producen o que pudiesen reportar en términos de datos no cumple necesariamente con los criterios de lo que podría denominarse como una estadística nacional, podría de alguna manera servir para, dentro de los reportes, ejemplificar ya de manera como bastante casuística algunos esfuerzos que se están haciendo desde esos sectores, ¿no? Para tenerlos como ejemplos o como casos ya muy concretos, ¿no? Y en el caso de Panamá, sobre todo también seguir adelante con los procesos de descentralización. Creo que somos uno de los países que tiene una tarea pendiente todavía en ese sentido, de poder generar de alguna manera procesos que tienen que ver con el cumplimiento de los ODS desde los gobiernos locales y a esos niveles. Para otros países creo que ya son tareas más o menos que ya van avanzadas, pero en el caso de Panamá todavía sigue siendo un reto pendiente y poder generar desde allí realmente como procesos que vayan desencadenando, digamos, cumplimientos de los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible desde esos niveles.
Thank you very much, Mr. Diaz, for that point. Elena Rivero has a question for Mr. Sibi. How do you think the regional system, through the Regional Forum on Sustainable Development, can coordinate in the work they do with the countries that will present VNR in the current year in order to become more participatory for other actors and not just closed to states?
Okay, thanks for the question. That's a great question, and obviously the UN system is called to work more together in the context of the reform. So I'm gonna try to explain how we are doing this or trying to do it, but that's obviously an excellent question. Well, the first thing I think is to bring together the regional and the national level. So that's a bit the role of the regional forum on sustainable development. That's also the role of DCO. His director could not join us today, but that's specifically, the new role of the Development Coordination Office, which brings together the resident coordinators with the regional level and with the global level. So the first thing, all the regional resident coordinators of the UN system attend the Regional Forum on Sustainable Development. That's where we try to fine-tune this nexus of the global between the national. That's obviously important, and it's a two-way track. From the regional side, our regional analysis are the lessons learned that we see from one country to another. When we identify an individual country that is in a VNR process and that requests guidance or let's say good practices, we try to emphasize those good practices, but we also try to do this triangular cooperation where a country exchanges with another one that has the relevant information. As I was saying, in the case of the Caribbean, VNRs this year, we've organized a few sessions where we asked Jamaica, like Latoya did today, or Bahamas, to mention them how they were able to generate momentum, to create, to prepare their VNRs, and to engage multiple stakeholders. We've done so the same on the national planning front. As you know, there's a lot of focus on integrating SDGs into national planning. There are some countries that have been very, very active in doing that, and we've been, bringing them closer to individual countries that were requesting for the same. And the issue of localization, as I said earlier, there are some countries that have been working a lot on that, such as Argentina, Peru, Mexico, and when other countries try to get closer to that, we do this cross-fertilization piece. Then there's also, I think, specific policy challenges, and Antonio referred to them, where it's also very useful from us, with the regional perspective, if you have a specific issue on, let's say, financing for development, resource mobilization, debt restructuring, or a specific aspect of the fiscal policy or reform, well, it's useful for one country also to be aware of what has been done in other countries. And that's another aspect, but this can be done in social policies, this can be done in environmental aspects. And then I think one of the new and interesting roles of the resident coordinators is precisely to channel specific national demands to the regional and to the global level, and to bring in other relevant experiences from the region, but it can also be from other regions. I mean, there are some cross-regional challenges that are relevant between, let's say, Asia Pacific, Africa, and Latin America. If you look at, governance of natural resources, or if you look at issues such as digital cooperation, financing for development, and so on. So it's also very useful that the regional commissions between themselves, and actually there's an event going in parallel as the one today, specifically on that issue, which is on localizing the SDGs from a cross-regional perspective in a VNR lab that is taking place in parallel to ours. We know there's a multiplicity of events. And finally, I think, as I was saying, the resident coordinators have to work on common country analysis and national frameworks for sustainable development. And I think that's where precisely the regional piece and the added value of the regional system of the United Nations is extremely useful, because precisely it brings the analytical framework from the region, it brings the comparative analysis and comparative data, and that's where I think, resident coordinators can capitalize a lot on what's been done in other countries. So I'll leave it here for now, but glad to take on other questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. C. We have a question from Elena, and I want to ask it to Mrs. Patiño. Do you think that the states are implementing right strategies to present and communicate results associated to each goal targets, or will be needed to create and implement a different strategy for future VNR construction?
Well, thank you, Elena, for this question. And I would say that as it has been a change from the way we have been presented. We have been presenting in previous years from the whole global of SDGs. So we are now moving to the specific of each global, to the goal target. So I don't think it could be a right strategy already made to present these results, but I do think that we should be taking a look into those states that are already doing it, how those states are managing it, how those states are relating with the goals target presentation itself, and how they are creating strategies and policies within their borders to implement each one of those goal targets. And I think that could be a way to move from the way we are presenting right now to a new way to present results and outcomes and even challenges on our way to walk to the 2030 agenda. And also, as we are getting close to the due date, we need to also take a look and to see how all other states within our regions are presenting their outcomes. Because that way, I think that could be a new, not merely a new strategy to present results or VNRs, but also a way to construct and to build a more integrated and a regional answer to all the challenges we are facing right now. So that could also help to understand in a better way how goal targets are being treated and also presented. I hope I have answered Elena's question. And I don't know, Elena, if I'm having a little bit more time to keep talking about this.
No, just 1 minute, but go on.
Okay, it's okay. I just wanted to thank Elena for this question.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Patiño, we have any comment from Mr. Sivi? We have 1 minute.
Yes, very quickly, because actually I realized that, can I speak in Spanish to answer to Elena, or you prefer? Okay. No, solamente porque veo que Elena nos hizo la pregunta muy relevante, ¿no? Sobre cómo sistematizar la participación de otros actores. Y en eso quería decirle, sí, por supuesto, esto es también el rol del foro regional. Y ahí justamente, bueno, hemos sistematizado, además del foro como tal, que es multiactor, un espacio sistemático que es el foro empresarial para los ODS, donde sistematizamos el diálogo con el sector privado, que es algo que organizamos con el Pacto Global, pero está también el mecanismo de participación de sociedad civil y el foro de sociedad civil. Estos dos foros sesionan en paralelo al foro regional, pero también interactúan constantemente con él, y eso es una forma de sistematizar el diálogo con otros actores, sector privado, sociedad civil, pero también otros, ¿no? Academia, socios extrarregionales, etcétera. Entonces simplemente quería decirle que es algo que está muy, muy presente en el mandato de las comisiones regionales. Gracias.
Thank you, Mr. Sivi. Of course, improvement is always the key. It has been a very interesting conversation full of reflections on the improvement of the VNRs. For Cepei and CCONG, it has been a great pleasure and a very insightful experience to share all these learnings and spotlights with all of you. Thank you very much and have a good high-level political forum day. Thank you.